she had heard this from somebody else, but she had said this to me, that there are only two types of people in life. They're either your friend or your teacher. So a friend will be there, but anybody who has made you feel any type of way or done you wrong, you have to reflect on why you gave them the power to have that effect over you. And that's a lesson that you need to learn. And that's something you need to reflect on internally, on why you gave them that power. It has nothing to do with them. It's why are you bothered by what they said?
Yeah, it's the trigger. It's the trigger.
The trigger.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I know sometimes I sing in musicals. It's a thing, but I can't help it because I get excited. And this week in particular, I'm very excited about for two things. I recently got an email saying that we reached 100 downloads. What? That is so cool. I'm so happy. I'm so excited that anyone would really listen. And I guess for me, I love these people. I love interviewing people. I love picking their brains out and just wanting to know more about their state of mind, their approach in their day-to-day life. And it just makes me so much happier to know somebody else wants to listen to it too. That's just even better. And the other thing about this week that I'm very excited about is that it is episode 10. This week we have Inder Dhillon. I'm going to say that is the white pronunciation, Inder Dhillon, but it's actually Inder Dhillon. Let's just put it on the podcast for record purposes. But also she's known as Preet. So I called her Preet on the podcast, but a lot of people know her as Inder as well. Preet was born in Canada and she's been living in Sydney for over 10 years. In this week's episode, we talk about Preet's journey from working in finance at Macquarie Bank to working as a creative director at twosix, which is her own swimwear line. Follow at I Am Banipreet for weekly updates on episodes, or you can just follow my YouTube channel, which is called Banipreet. All right, I'm so excited for you to hear this. Let's get straight into it.
For those of you that are just tuning in, but
you go for it.
Bonnie's been helping me for the angles, the lighting and all this, and this needs to be on do not disturb and put something up behind this. I'm like, oh, and then, listen, it's go time.
It is go time. And let's start with this. Well, let's just start with this hype. All right. Because I'm not the only I am not the only one. I've seen you BTS the hype and in front of the hype. I've seen both. But what does it take for you to actually get to that space? For you to have that much energy to just project out to life?
It's kind of my default. It takes a lot to restrain it. When I'm just okay, gotta be a grown up for a minute, and then I'm all right, be sensible. My son said to me the other day, we're going back to Canada after 3 years. And we're pretty ridiculous with each other, our whole family, the three of us. And Seva said something and I started cracking up or whatever. I was like, we're going to have to be on our best behavior when we go back home. Otherwise, we're going to get in trouble. And he's like, I can be sensible. I know how to go into school mode. You're going to get in trouble from Nana like the grandparents. I'm like, he is not wrong. Yeah, so I think this is default. So when I have to make a conscious effort to rein it in and focus, when we were setting everything up, or if I'm in a situation where it's a business meeting, or I also lecture at uni now. So if it's if I'm with the dean or the head teachers or whatever it is, whatever the situation, it's all right, put your big girl pants on and keep your shit together. But at default, you've seen me at we've got 10 years of friendship behind us. This is default. I don't turn on a switch. I'm like, all right, let's go hype. And it's just what it is. Yeah. Which is a lot. And it becomes, and it's not a lot for me. I feel like it's a lot for people on the receiving end, and just being somebody who is hyper aware of her surroundings. I'm constantly having to check myself and just be rein it in, that's all.
Rein it in.
Rein it in. That's going to be our motto for this.
You were born and raised in Canada on a farm among a village.
Correct.
Tell me about that. What was that like?
Yeah, so I'm the eldest of four siblings, four offspring. And so, but we grew up with my uncle's family as well. So they've got two kids. So I was kind of the eldest of six. And, but so we weren't always on the farm. So we moved onto the farm when I was a teenager. But for the rest of my younger siblings, they absolutely grew up on the farm their whole lives and stuff. It was amazing. There's a lot of transient stuff. You could kind of like engineer your life situation away because there was so much happening and so much noise that you could like be slithery. You could get away with a lot of stuff. You could be explorative, and they were exhausted because they were, immigrant parents working their asses off as entrepreneurs and grandparents, lots of grandparents, lots of aunties and uncles, lots of like chosen family, a lot of love, a lot of insanity, a lot of love. You've experienced it during my sister's wedding 6 years. It's going to be 6 years now, 6 years ago. Right? Yeah.
That's crazy.
I
I
know.
love Vancouver when I went. That was like such a special holiday. It's such a special city. But I wonder, does part of your hypeness and part of that energy come from anyone in your family in particular? Or is it like a blend of any characters in your family?
I'm my chacha, my uncle Bitu, and who I love and adore. Him and I are probably each other's spirit animals. And it's like, if there's anything serious in the family, like that we have to go to, like as kids, I just remember them saying, you two cannot look at each other. Because the minute we look at each other, we just start cracking up. And that is to this day, like, he refuses to acknowledge he's above the age of 28, but I have no shame in admitting I'm a minute shy of 40. But even at this point, we still, if we look at each other, we crack up. So I think I get a lot of my humor from him. But they're all like my family. It's one of those things where everybody's just, they're hilarious. Humor is our coping mechanism. It's just like, it could be the most hurtful sort of situation, but we'll all laugh through it. And I think amongst our family, we were talking about this just amongst my cousins, now that we've got like the privilege of having access to knowledge, right? Which, I mean, they had access to knowledge too, but ours is at our fingertips. And we were just talking about how like, everybody is actually so sentimental, but we hide it. It's like, you can't be this erratic and this passionate without having the adverse side of it as well. But we just like put this like giant facade on and just deflect, like, nothing to see here, folks. The circus act is in play, and that's everybody's. But it's different. Like, I feel, all of us siblings I was the eldest, so I had the most immediate exposure to it. And my parents were very young when they had me. They were 19 or 20 when they had me. And my uncles and stuff, they were all in their like late teens, early 20s when I was growing up. So I was like this little, like minion that they had, as like a tag along or mini me that I got to like, so I knew all the relatives and everything. But I think like as they went down, like by the time it was like number 3 and 4, they could kind of do their own thing. They weren't expected to like be at all these things, it wasn't being, dragged along or tagging along to everything. So all of us are and you can attest to this, that everybody in that house is vastly different from one another. There was an adult that resonated with each one of us differently or inspired us differently. So as a result, and it's a very liberal upbringing as well. So as a result, we've been experimentative, I guess, in our sort of like career choices, paths, life, and everything, and we express differently. And for some, it could be like, I know, and I can't speak for my other siblings or other kids who grew up in the house, but I think like the pressure of it sometimes was stifling, of just to perform, because everybody is extremely hyper functioning in our house, I would say. Everybody's quite accomplished. The big shoes to fill for everyone. Yeah.
I think that you have had, I feel like you must have had a really different upbringing from your youngest sibling.
Absolutely. And we laugh about this all the time. So on Halloween, Seva, my son, who's turning 8 this week, he does this thing because we live quite close to a school, and it's like the transient sort of like middle point where everybody passes by. So our door is always unlocked, whatever, nobody knows where I live on the other end of this podcast, but our door is always open and people are always coming and going and stuff. And he's so his friend, so he like invited everybody, and it was like, so and so's coming. So my sister was over and he's like, Musty, so and so's coming, this person's coming, this person might not come. And then he goes, my mom grew up in a house with a lot of people, so she doesn't mind when people come over. And Karen looks at him, she's like, yeah, I grew up in the same house. And I'm like, I'm like, Seva, we even have the same parents, even though she got a different version of them.
Oh my gosh.
She's like a lot younger. My parents had like matured and, they'd like done it twice before. She's number 3. So it was really funny. We always laughed that she got, the younger two got a different version of my parents than Harry and I, who are 14 months apart. Yeah, so absolutely different versions. And we can attest to that as adults ourselves. Imagine having children at the age of 20 and 21. Like versus where we are
ridiculous.
now.
Yeah.
What, like, I remember going back home at 28. My dad was like, when I was 28, I had 4 kids and 2 houses. What are you guys doing with your life? He was joking, obviously, but we're like, whoa, listen, 1972, get out of here. All right.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said 1972. Yeah. It's a song. It's a great song. We'll put it in the show notes, folks.
When I learned about Montessori and the age from 6 to 12 years old for a child, the whole goal of our classroom is to create a mini society. And your family should be doing that. You're creating like life circumstances and a mini society and a reality. And the idea of you coping through humor, how has that helped you in your life?
It's been fine. I think as I very deeply and firmly believe and passionately believe in therapy. And for the last 7 years, I go on a regular basis. Like, it's the one indulgence. And it's a shame that it's an indulgence because not everybody has access to it as they should. But I go to therapy once a month, like unless something comes up, and it's not, I prefer to look at it as mental hygiene. So it's not like something's wrong. It's more, what part of my life can I better? What part of my psyche can I understand? What habits have I developed? It's coming from a place of not accepting. It's a knowing that you can actually unlearn behaviors. You can unlearn. So it's not to like discount your existence in the sense of I am who I am. You're absolutely not. You can constantly evolve and change and better yourself and keep reinventing yourself. So one of the things in therapy that I'm unpacking now is humor it's been a great mechanism for the time being, but it's also a hindrance because you don't actually feel the pain or the hurt or whatever it is that you're hiding behind. So then it just keeps becoming a culmination of the last of the last of the last from way back when. And then all of a sudden you're at the age of 40 and you've got 4 decades worth of like little tiny things, and it'll be the little thing like a shoe being out of place. That's the one that sets you off, but it's not about the shoe being out of place. It is about decades of whatever you had pushed down below and laughed off as a joke, like nothing to see here. I was laughing with one of my friends the other day, and it was everybody knows I'm like deep down like the biggest crybaby. Like even happiness, anything happens, I'm like, that's so beautiful. And Sybil was asking like, are those happy tears or sad tears?
Can you clarify, please?
Can you clarify? I'm like kind of unsure, but I was like saying to somebody, I was like, listen, behind all of this, there's this tiny little caricature of like a cartoon with these giant eyes that's crying, and there's a river of tears flowing, and I'm like in the corner, like that's
and we're laughing about this right now. Right? But I think that's so, I agree with you. I think at some point it becomes a defense mechanism or a coping mechanism. But to learn how to process humor at such a young age among a village of people who've given you different characters and different adversities just growing up is such a gift. I remember watching a podcast, and Kerry Washington, she said, when she goes to therapy, it's like a gift to myself and everyone that I love. Like this is like a treat. And as soon as she said that, I was indulgence. Like, yes, it's total indulgence. And it's total like, and
which
again,
is unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. And it's like this idea of it being a gift, that perception just shifts your whole perspective on how you think you're seen in life.
Mm-hmm.
That judgment. But I want to know a bit more about like skipping to university, like past university, and getting into finance. I really want to dig into this. So when you decided to go from finance, working at Macquarie Bank, and into fashion, can you explain to our viewers and listeners what Parsons is and that kind of progression for you to realize that fashion was your space?
Yeah, I guess I suppose I should give a bit of like, I grew up in Vancouver, which in not in just Vancouver, in Surrey, which is very in the part that of town we lived in, it was like everybody banded together in the Punjabi community. And then I went to Call School, which is, a Sikh religious private school that I went to for 10 years. And you just get this feeling internally like this is great, but there's more elements to me. And I think being a creative and there's that dichotomy that comes with being raised in an immigrant family versus like being a Canadian. So it's like, which of the two, and you're straddling between the two, but you're like, wait, I'm both. Like, I don't like, and this, I don't mean no offense to this or anything, but when you're not born in Punjab or, you're like, that's so far removed, but your family's trying to get you to like connect to it at such a visceral level, and you're like, I get it, I understand, I respect my heritage, but also that would be like me saying to you, like, why don't you discount where you're from in Punjab because like I'm born in Canada. This is also a part of me and who I am and all of that. So there's also always this like sort of uneasiness of like, I don't belong in this narrative. I appreciate it, I love it, but it's making me so uncomfortable that I want to burst out of my skin,
And what is that narrative?
The narrative of like, just the cultural narrative of suburbia and, this is our heritage, and it's very prideful and beautiful, and I honor it. It's our roots, and but it's a singularity, and I think that you can be multifaceted. That that resonates so deeply. I respect it, I love it, all of it. But just being a hyper functioning creative, I think I have 18,000 versions of those in my mind. Maybe I'm some sort of like, whatever, I was just going to self-diagnose. We're not going to do that. So I grew up in a house of very eclectic people, entrepreneurs. My parents were, I like to refer to them as cowboys. They're hilarious, but they didn't have like your normal trajectory as most immigrant Indian families in not in Canada. This happens a lot, but like in the rest of the world, they're all skilled migrants. So they're like doctors or, veterinary doctors or teachers or something or another. They have this like, or engineers, they have this like professional accreditation that allowed them to migrate as a skilled migrant, and then have these like really beautiful sort of like sophisticated lives. And meanwhile, we grew up like in a family of the most hysterical, just cowboys, as I want to call them. I don't know what it was. You constantly try to unpack the sort of like uneasiness. I'm like, I need normal, I need structure. So I study finance. And I remember going to New York with my cousin at the age of 18. And we were visiting one of my uncles, and we had the best time. And I said to her, we were in Midtown, and I go to my cousin Japs. I was like, I'm gonna live here. And she just looked at me like, get the like, look, there's some like colorful vernacular used, and she's like, get out of here. Like, who the hell leaves like Vancouver? Like, stop. And so then, I moved to Australia, I got a job in finance. And then at the age of 22, or 23, I was transferred to New York and working on Wall Street. And I did it. I got there, and then you could see the steps, that these would be the next steps to get me to like, like within the career, within the profession of what would be the next step. Okay, I'm a senior now, then you'll do this and you'll do this. And I was like, I fucking hate this. As I say, I'm not going to swear. I literally like swear.
Did you enjoy it at the time when you were doing it?
It was challenging, but it wasn't, I just knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so we were there during the recession, and so after market close, I had nothing to do, and I didn't know anybody in New York. So I just started doing night classes and weekend classes at Parsons. Parsons is the new school of design. It's one of the renowned fashion colleges like in the world. Project Runway is filmed there. And so I did that nights and weekends, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So we had 5 weddings that we had to go to 2 years later. And so we decided to pack up our lives in New York. And between the 5 weddings, we backpacked through Europe, ended up in Vancouver for my brother's wedding. And then we came back to Australia, and I had a role with Macquarie still lined up for a couple of months. And whilst I was doing that, I applied to all the fashion schools, and I got in, and I'd given myself this sort of pep talk of, if you get into the fashion design studio in Ultimo, which is it's been around 80 years, it's produced 80% of like Australian designers have come from there. And so I was like, if I get into this program, I'm going to leave that was my sort of like pep talk I gave myself, or like my ultimatum, but you're not going to leave your well-paying finance job unless you get into here. And I did. So in January 2010, I left finance, and that was at the age of 25. And I started studying full time for 3 years, and then got one of the spots in Fashion Week, which is the innovator show. It was the only design college at that point that would have a fully sponsored show to launch their collection. I picked up 2 stockists from that. I was also 5 months pregnant during that. I'm a stickler for causing myself pain, but so instead of, when I got the Fashion Week spot after my graduate collection, I created a brand new collection for Fashion Week. So generally what you do is, like, you've got your graduate collection. If you get the spot, like the top students get the spot, and then they extend it. So I started from scratch. Yeah. So what was at the powerhouse was my graduate collection pieces. And it was that was there for 6 months. So yeah, it was simultaneously there was a lot of different things happening at the same time. But what started it all was pieces from my graduate collection were actually featured in Italian Vogue. And then that's when, like, sort of like things just started moving. But it was a confusing time because I was also pregnant at the time. So it was, I was like, yep, I'm going to do everything at the same time. I'm going to have the nursery at the studio.
What was that confusing period like? How did you navigate that?
I didn't. It was a struggle. It was awful. It was very challenging because I think biologically, the body changes so much that you can't experience until you experience it, right? So when you grow up in this narrative of I'm a feminist, I'm an equal, I can do everything, there is no cap to my existence. At that point, I'd reached every single accolade that I ever wanted to. I just never saw, when you like see something on television or you read about somebody, you're like, wow, that's not my life. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'll do that. That's just been, it's just been
Keep it coming.
MO, right? So I'm like, cool, let's do it. But it was this reality of humanity that sort of happens where you change biologically so much during that, and it's evolution, not even evolution, it's survival. We're wired with this being that you create, where your hormones change, that that this being's soul survival is dependent just on you. So you're like, I have slept through a car on fire in our garage in our apartment block. Fire alarms, the whole works. I could sleep through anything. And I was like, my siblings, I used to drive them to school in the mornings. They'd have to come wake me up. I could sleep through anything. And when my baby was born, he would cough and I was up, and I was like, who am I? So it was just kind of like this, you have this overwhelming rush of emotions and hormones, and you just want to protect this human from everything, and you're like in sync with them. But then in the back, you're like, but I used to be this person too. Oh, I used to have this. And then it was like just all the things all the momentum that was starting to build up from Fashion Week and everything. So it was a lot. And also Seva wasn't sleeping much. He had a ear infection condition for the first 18 months where he wasn't sleeping more than two hours at a time. See, that's when that energy, where like you bring in that energy of like the hype woman, because you know me, and I love people and success and their joy. Like I think us as humanity, we're one, and we can share in that. So like somebody else's joys and their trials and tribulations and all of that, we can all share within that. So I genuinely, like, when somebody has a win, you've seen me, I'm like, fuck yeah,
Yeah.
I had to exit because I couldn't bring that. So that sort of sharing in people's lives or all of that, I didn't have capacity for it. So I didn't speak to anybody for 2 years. And the only thing I did was I poured myself into my work. So, once night times, like the business kept going, I kept designing collections, I kept working on things. And yeah, I've launched a couple businesses that I've done, you remember the podcast we did for a minute as well. We did about, a season of it. I poured myself into work. So rather than getting up, keep sleeping and getting up and needing rest, I just, in all my waking hours, instead of socializing and talking to anybody, I just worked really hard. I didn't acknowledge it. I'm like, the minute somebody asks me, how are you doing? Or what are you doing? Or whatever, I'm going to fall apart. So I blocked it out. I blocked out everything. And at that point, I didn't have family here. Like my sister and all of them weren't here, so it was just the three of us in Sydney. So we did create this little insular sort of, I don't know, bubble for ourselves. Yeah, and it wasn't until Seva was 2. He's a very aware child, I would say, and we call him the savage wizard because he sees all these things, but he's a child. He doesn't know how to like sugarcoat it, you know. So he says all these like things, but
he's a fascinating child. I love him.
He's hilarious.
I was wondering if we would bring it up, but the way we met and the way we consistently met was through him. And I kid you not, like he's 3 years old. He's like, Bunny, do you want to come over? Like he would invite me. This is like, he's like an internal host. Like you know how he's like inviting people over. He's got like, my friends are coming. Like he had it from when he was so young. And and he's really attentive too. So every time, so I was working in Bondi, just for context, I was working as a chef at a cafe in Bondi on Hall Street. And for those of you who need to know about Bondi, is that people who live in Bondi stay in Bondi. And so that's
I've been here 16 years.
They don't leave, genuinely. And so that's where I met Preet, and she was with her son. And every time they would come visit, we would have really long conversations at this cafe when it was like a dead period of time during the day. And then I remember Seva would ask if I would like to come over. It wasn't even you. And then I would say, sure. And then you would say, I guess you're coming over. I'll see you after work. And I was like, I guess so. And it was just like
because
that.
We knew each other through mutual friends and family and everything.
Totally.
But we never like, we had this version of each other, of one another in our minds, right?
Totally.
But when we talk, we'd be like, wait, I'd have this like,
what just happened? What the fuck just happened?
I think she might be my people.
I just realized, I remember I was taking a video of you feeding him, and no, I think he was eating himself and you were just there with him, and I was taking a video of him and he's like, Mama, you happy? Just out of the blue. And I was like, what?
I know.
What? And you're like, baby, am I happy? And he's like, yeah. And you're like, yeah, I am happy. She's like, okay. And then you just kept eating. I was like,
so you know what he's like turning 8 now, and he's like so cool now, right?
Yeah.
So he won't ask that. He'll be like, you good, Mom? That's what he asked me. Yeah. You good? I'll be like, yeah, baby, I'm good. What did he say to me the other day? I've been, and you know this, like our families endured a lot of loss. Like we've lost a lot of people in a very short amount of time over COVID, just these last 2 years or 18 months or whatever it is. And so, you know, sometimes it hits you, and there were certain periods where I feel like I've finally been accepting that I have to grieve through it and just been quiet. And he goes to me, he's like, you good, Mama? He's been asking me, and then he goes, I was like, yeah, I'm good. And then he goes, you're very normal these days, and you're usually not normal, and that's what I love about you. And I'm like, what the fuck?
He's like he's your like spiritual check-in, you know?
Definitely.
He's, you know, I just think about that. So like from being confused during that time, from, you know, grad school and your shows, and you really like things are really turning for you. And then for 18 months or 2 years, you really just honed in on your work to process your life and with your son. And now from being a student of that school to now being a teacher of that school, I mean, what has that been like? Like full circle? Yeah. Tell me about that.
It is full circle, but so I had a clothing label, which I sold on the Iconic, and I sold, you know, had a few stockists and stuff. I had a shop in Paddington for a little while, but, you know, I was working 2, maybe 3 days a week because I was still a mom full time, and that's all we could afford for daycare because, you know, this part of town
is expensive.
Listen, it is no joke over here.
It is no joke.
No,
daycare
not even a little bit.
No.
And so that was, and you know, I didn't have family that I can leave him with and stuff. So it was, I would put him to sleep at like 8 p.m. and then work through the night and whatever. And then so when he started school full time, that's when I was like, oh, okay. So this is the first time in like 5 years that I've got time again to put my energy into something. So I started a swim label on the side, and the swim label just gained a lot of traction. So I paused the other label because this one would just make more commercial sense. And we launched here, massive milestones. We launched here at Tachuzi, which is a renowned like boutique internationally. We launched with them exclusively. And then the second year we were exclusive with Glue. And then went into the States, and in the US where with Free People, which is a part of Urban Outfitters. And it just all that started happening. And then COVID happened. So, the beginning of COVID, it was, when you're like, there's a quote that resonates so deep with me. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So it's like all these relationships, all this stuff I'd done, over the culmination of it, all the skills I'd built up, we were at the point where I had very close to securing US funding for the brand. We had a distribution network that we were negotiating with for ready to wear. So we had a full ready to wear collection, ready to launch, knitwear under the swim label as well, sunglasses collection, all of it that was going to be in UK, Europe, and Middle East.
What made you decide to even go into swimwear?
Australian art, Australian design, Australian music, it has such a spotlight on it, So, I can't create a Gore-Tex collection and label it as an Australian brand. Just doesn't make sense, So for me, it was like, how do I package, the lifestyle of Bondi or Australia that everybody is so drawn to internationally, and give them a product that's specifically catered for that? And that's what it was. So it was a very limited a very refined collection of essentials, and it's built up. And then we found our sort of like niche, and and I had no, just obviously you want things to like succeed, but I didn't realize how much interest it would get in it. So come COVID time, we had all these things. We were pitching a collab to a major international retailer as well, like an athletic apparel brand. So lots of moving pieces, and then COVID happened. I had a full team, I had a head office, and then everything just paused. The world paused, and I just was trying to figure out what to do. So everybody was coasting for about all of 2020. And in 2021, I got a message from one of my old profs where I studied, and was like, would you be interested in teaching a class? One question, one sentence. I literally responded, fuck yeah. And he responds back. They respond back, they're like, we'll call you tomorrow. And I get a call, and they're like, the job is yours if you want it. I'm like, wait, what? They're like, this is a Wednesday. They're like, you start on Monday. I'm like, guys, seriously? Like, and what had happened is, I think they because of COVID, people changing their lives and stuff, they had way more enrollments than they had anticipated. I mean,
wow.
maybe I'm speaking for myself, but that's the impression I got. They had 5 first-year classes. So all of last year I taught first years. I taught design foundations, color theory, and production drawing. And now they've just given me a second year class. But it's been good. It's just part-time, something I do on the side. But it's really reinvigorated, like why I love the industry, why I love being creative. It surrounds me with creative minds. And it's also just this, acceptance of knowing that I have accumulated a lot of experience that I can give back to them. And in the creative field, it's very isolating. It's not like, it's not like physics or anything that's linear where it makes sense. It's like there's steps to it, and that's, there's a right and wrong way of doing things. But in the creative process, there isn't. It's all subjective. Yes, you can teach the foundations, but it's always open to interpretation, and the balance you can achieve in so many different ways. And that's the beauty of it as well. But when you're in that space and you don't have somebody who guides you, it's very lonely, it's isolating, it's confronting, it's confusing. You sit in a place of just feeling like a misfit almost,
Do you see yourself in your students?
100%. But also I'm batshit crazy. So the first sort of like term, I've never taught anything before. And because it's all the teachers, I'm the only one that, apart from maybe one other one, all the other profs there were my old teachers, So first of all, I was like a little bit like quiet, and I'd be like, I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble. And they'd be like, girl, bye. Like, you're not. And then I remember this one teacher, I like said something, one of the profs, I like swear it, and she looked at me, she's like, and I was like, I am your colleague now, okay? Not your student. You can do it.
The fact that it's reinvigorated just any aspect is so amazing. I think students, whether they're children or adults, like that's what they do. That's the kind of feedback you get from teaching. And it's such a gift, like to just use it and to use it in like the right way. But let's backtrack. I really want to backtrack to twosix. What's a creative director's typical day like for you?
Never the same.
Yeah. Tell me.
Never. It depends. Now it's different. But when I had the team, it was cyclical in the sense that when we were designing collections for trade shows, we've shown collections at the top swim trade shows in the world. So then, yeah, it's like we'll have meetings with the staff of, this is what we're working on, these are the colorways, and we'll have fittings. It depends. We'll do photo shoots, but right now it's like, it's just everything's on pause. Everything's on pause. It's all happening in the background, but it's not typical. But the world's not typical right now. But as a creative director of a fashion brand, historically speaking, it would be, you have your timelines of when you need to design a collection, and then you're constantly communicating with your factory to develop prototypes, sending measurements and colorways, and different design things that you need done, whatever, and they're called tech packs, like specifications that you send to the factories. And then you get your samples that come back, and then you do fittings with models, and we do several fittings on several different size smalls just to make sure that we net out any issues.
So what's the time span of that?
We used to do 4 collections a year.
Okay.
So it was very fast timelines. But yeah, so within that, like 2-3 months of developing the collection, having it come back, then you shoot it. You would do a campaign and a lookbook, and a campaign is more of a field. Lookbook is quite methodical, where you're showing the details of it on a straight body. And then that would go to the agency in California, and then they would do the trade shows where they would take orders. And then it's that's just the design element of it. And then you've got the business side of it, which is the production side. So you're basically, with whatever orders you've gotten, you're placing the orders with the factory, and sending them all the details, like if there's any like tagging specifications, or how it's being packaged, how it's being sent to which retailer. And then you've got, so that's within the production cycle. And then you've got your e-com, there's a team, or marketing. So you've got like your EDMs, like mail distribution that needs to go, social media channels, gifting campaigns that happen before a new collection launches. We do campaigns of sending to like influencers, social media. And yeah.
So now is it like a routine? Like, do you feel like it's like routine? Like you understand that? I mean, you're probably so used to that process, but that's
yeah.
It's so interesting you said the 10 years of an overnight success, because I actually wrote that down in my notes because I wanted to bring it up again, because that's what you said the last time we had a chat about your work. And I guess you still believe in that. But what do you think is involved in those 10 years? Do you mean just like the actual practice of it, or do you mean the emotional maturity as well?
I think every interaction, the way, I think you just have to go through life being as authentic and genuine as you can. Not everything needs to be an exchange of goods. Like the interactions or the meetings or the human connection that I'd had throughout the years. It may not have been for when I ran the brand Inder Dhillon. It may not have been for whatever I was doing then, but like, it was somebody I connected with 7 years later for twosix, and they're like, yep, this is the perfect brand for us. Or, if it was for a distribution, or if it was a photographer, or if it was for whatever it wasn't that I called that person in that moment. It was somebody that I had connected with or been introduced to somebody just out of this genuine desire and willingness to want to connect with people. And it wasn't there. That goes a lot further than only interacting with somebody because you need something. It's like, I didn't need anything from those people for those 10 years, but you have to have a genuine interest in other people and a willingness to realize that their life is the center of their universe, and appreciate and respect that, and connect with them because you genuinely want to connect with them, not because you're like, what can they do for me, or who can they connect me to? Who the fuck cares? Everybody's interesting. I mean, listen, some people can be boring, but that's their prerogative. I'm joking.
So how do you sustain that? How have you sustained your relationships, professional and personal, throughout so many years that somebody could contact you years later like it's no big deal?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them, but like, anybody can contact me whenever. And I'm generally, there's never been an instant where I'll be like, fuck off, you know. But I don't know how you sustain. It's I think it's also because I am an extrovert, so it's easier to say to somebody, like, if it's debilitating for somebody to have a conversation with another person, that's different. But like, I literally talk to everyone and their mom and their dog, you know, like I'm on my street, like it feeds me. Like I wake up in the morning, I go to the cafe and I'm like conversations with everyone, and it's just I'm that way inclined. And it's not because like, you know, so and so might be somebody so important or not. I don't even know what the fuck anybody does half the time. But it's really funny, a lot of times way later, you know, the so and so is like the CEO of like a ASX listed company or something. I'm like, oh no shit, all right, okay, cool. You know, like that's never been the case. Like I've never, even when we're hanging out with my friends and stuff, we're all quite, you know, you know, we're all quite accomplished, I must say. But you know, it's nobody taught you, leave that at the door. You know, you don't go in and say, oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. No, you're
With
just
all your
there having,
stripes and everything.
exactly, you're just there, you know, humans having human experiences, having fun. And I think when you're that way inclined, where you wanting to constantly achieve stuff, so there's a similar sort of vibration that resonates within all of you, so you can kind of just like be yourself, but you're not there like competing resumes, you know,
Or like
or like,
networking for an agenda.
no.
How do you sustain your creative process through anything, through the pressure of life?
It's taken me a very long time to come to this place of acceptance that I function only under pressure. So when I have nothing going on, there for many years there was this guilt associated to I should be doing something. Um, and it's debilitating because you're like, okay, let me sit down to do something, but nothing would happen. So now I've accepted that if this is like, you know, normal people will be at a steady pace and get their outcome. With me, I'll be down here, then I'll be way the fuck up here and I'll get that outcome, you know, but I can't do it here. The output is just not going to be of any quality that I wanted to. But I've realized as part of the creative process that when I'm down in this place of lull, let's call it, it's actually my mind. Because in a creative space, it's not like you have a formula, right? You are extrapolating something out of your mind. You're pulling shit out of thin air, but you're really not. You're taking in your environment. You're picking up everything in your peripheries. It's like this dynamic process of everything visceral is being absorbed. So you have to allow yourself to do that. My neighbors, what I would do is every few months, I would completely rearrange the studio, like completely. And it was a big space, like, I mean, warehouse shelving down, everything. And after a little while, and it wasn't even just one person, all of them, they'd come by, they'd be like, new collection time? I was like, wait, what? And it was right before a new collection. I would spend a week or two completely rearranging the entire place, like down to emptying every shelf and every pencil, like little things, because I realized ideas were simmering. I was marinating, and I needed to. And it's like it's engaging your subconscious with the tactile, something tactile. So the other parts can really hone in. So it's like, this is why, like, whenever people, you know, have stress or anxiety, they recommend doing something tactile, like gardening or playing an instrument or coloring or drawing or painting or whatever it is. It's because you need to engage your tactile mind with something that's quite methodical, so other ideas can be isolated and they can sit as their own entity. You know, you have to separate the two. So I didn't realize I was doing that until everybody, I was like, oh shit, okay, cool. You know, meanwhile I'd be like, I should be designing this collection, why isn't it coming to me? I'm just gonna like organize the shelf, you know, like,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's my process of pressure. I need it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the idea of creativity and using up creativity, like Maya Angelou once said, you know, you can never use creativity up. Like the more you use it, the more you have it. Which kind of brings me to your writing and painting right now, which you're totally just emerged in. I'm going to assume that, you know, you've always been a drawer and, you know, a sketcher that has become painting, and in regards to writing that you've always written, but now it's just more. So is that the case? And how has that kind of been part of your medium now with fashion?
Correct. So as part of my fashion study for 3 years, I've done 2 years of art. Like, so, and nobody, and it's funny because like people are like, oh, we didn't know you were an artist. And I'm like, I have an art degree. Like, what? You know? And but I don't, it's not, I don't do it in that way. It's because like I realize that, you know, when you have this like person sitting over there who's just watching this, it's like, you crazy bitch. Like, how the fuck are they meant to keep up with your 18th version of you right now? Right? Like, it's
Wait, stop. This is real talk. This is just like you're talking to me right now. The amount of versions. Oh, I can't. I feel like I'm a chameleon. My life, I'm a shapeshifter and a chameleon. That is just the story of my
like,
fucking life.
you know,
Okay.
and you hear it, and you're like, oh, like, and literally there's like this like little caricature. This one's a sassy bitch that's sitting there and it's eye rolling, the same caricature eyes. It's like, oh, like again now. Oh, like you're gonna tell them you're a writer now? Fuck you, you know. We surround ourselves, and I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she's one of those beautiful people who she used to be a lawyer for the UN in New York, and she's like, her family and friends and everybody are such, like, there are things that we've all engaged with in life at an international level that, you know, her partner, her family, or somebody connected to her have created, like at an like these are like big achievers, you know. And our worlds and everybody we interact with are of that same sort of like, you know, it's like, let's create this idea, done, you know. Like, you know, their friends and stuff of theirs that have like listed internationally and now worth like 300 million, all these sorts of like really high achieving things. And I'm like, that becomes our default, you know. And so when we say stuff, you know, we assume that that is how everybody interacts. So we assume that everybody understands the creative process and how it's dynamic and how it cannot stay stagnant. It needs to constantly evolve. And when you learn more, you want to learn a different way. You want to express a different way. You want to flex a different part of your mind, because we've got dynamic minds. It's not, if somebody were to put us in a room and be like, do this process all day long, we would be awful at it. I mean, like, it would be like people would go bankrupt because we would fuck everything up, you know? So you need people who have that linear thought process, who can process things in a very focused manner. But we can't discount one or the other. And we forget that not everybody, just because we surround ourselves with creatives, that not everybody can understand the creative process. So when we say shit like, I'm doing this now, I'm doing that now, it makes them uncomfortable. You know, they're just, because they can't understand. They're like, you know, wait, what? Like, that's so irresponsible. And then they're like twitching and stuff, you know, and I recognize that now, like, you know, nearly 40, I'm like, okay, that's cool. And so I a lot of times don't even say it. You know, you got to just be able to read the room. I remember I was back home like 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, for my cousin's wedding. That was the last time I was there. And one of my sister-in-laws, so I was there in the day the wedding was over, the events the next morning, I was going to fly to LA and then New York. And so my dad or my uncle were like, what time's your flight to LA in the morning? I was like, I've got to be at the airport by 6. And she was sitting next to me. She's like, that's so nice that your company lets you like travel around for work like that. And I look at her and I was like, I own the company. Like, and she had no idea. She was like, what do you do? I was like, I own a swim label. And she was like, what? You know, and it's just like, nobody knows what the fuck I do, because I'm like, I'm not doing this, you know, like,
Right. So that's been a
yeah,
conscious decision.
100%, because it's just too confusing for like, because I feel it. It's not any judgment for one or the other. It's I see the discomfort that it brings in people who I don't know, maybe it's discomfort, maybe it's judgment, maybe it's confusion, maybe it's like a whole plethora of things. But that's cool. Like, I know I've accepted that, you know, as my son says, that I'm not normal, and that's cool, you know, and that's all right. And just roll with it.
You know, you did mention earlier that you have experienced a lot of loss in the past 18 months or so. And I wonder, what do you even think grief is?
No idea. No idea what grief is. I don't know. I think these are the moments in our lives that make us question our purpose, our mortality in life is very confronting. And you have to recalibrate. I'm at that point where I just, and I'm trying to shake it up, and it's weekly therapy at this stage, but it's, you get to the point of, I just don't give a fuck, it's just like, build all this for what? Like, I'm just like, ever somebody just like light this shit on fire and I just want to watch it burn, because you're like, you could die tomorrow. But then you have to realize, like, everybody has their own journey, and that we have to honor with integrity our choices and our purpose. But then you do have to recalibrate and question and really sit down with, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? If I die tomorrow, have I lived a life to appease others, or have I lived a life that fulfilled my existence? Because, and then you're confronted with, like, I'm like, okay, it's not about material gain. I'm here to create a legacy, something that far surpasses me. But then I'm like, why though? Is that me trying to serve my own ego? Is that the narcissist in me? Am I narcissistic? Like, it's a circular combo. So you just have to go through all those things, and you have an existential crisis moment of what is existence. You start, all the things are up for questioning. But grief is a mirror that reflects all of that. But amongst it all, you have to celebrate the people who shaped you and made you who you are. And grief, I have found, it doesn't have a timeline. It doesn't have a definition. It doesn't have a face or a shape. It comes in many different ways. And I'm just learning to be kinder to myself, and just realizing that I just have to accept the present moment, sit with the discomfort. That's the other thing, I'm like, no more laughing, no more comedy. Just sit with the discomfort of what's happening and accept it. And make it feel icky and gross, or whatever it is. Those questions that are coming to my mind, don't just pass them off and keep yourself busy. Don't escape. So, and I think because there's been so many, the first one, you can like shake yourself off and keep going. And when you do that for so many times, and it's just like, I don't want to shake it. Like, shake it off. Why? Like, okay. It's just, a constant reminder of the mortality in life, not everything. And the thing is, though, after this, you can never be the same person again. Yeah, grief is heavy, man, but you've got to sit with it. You've got to sit with the heaviness and rebuild and find purpose and intent and just recalibrate.
I think sometimes at certain points, friends can help you through grief, and just be there, and not be anything in particular, but be a presence. And at times it's like, it's helpful, and at times it's unhelpful. But at the times it has been unhelpful, at the times it has been helpful, what do you think the most important thing about friendship is to you?
I think all we have in life is the present moment. That's the only guarantee. And I've always prescribed to this way of life, but I'm more vocal about it now, in the sense that I'm not going to get all bent out of shape about a hypothetical tomorrow.
Okay.
In the sense that, I'm not going to be like, I'm working for this for tomorrow, and I'm going to be this way for tomorrow because I'm going to do this or whatever. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. The only thing we have guaranteed in life is the present moment. And with those friendships and all the love and everything that I've been surrounded by, and we all are surrounded by, it's just about being present in that moment and really loving up that moment, and just being like, I'm so grateful for this interaction, and for this level of, even if it's like an escape, even if it's like comedy, hysterical, whatever the hell it is, it's just like, this, in this present moment, we are two people having a connection of whatever sort. What does it mean? What does it have to mean? What is it going to be at the end of it? Is this going to help me get through my grief? I don't fucking know. I don't know. I don't know if there's this hypothetical light at the end of the tunnel, all of that. I've gotten to this point, I've written this bit on like, fuck your isms, and your anecdotes and your should haves and all this. It's vulgar, man, but like, yeah, it starts off with fuck your isms. I'm like over it. Like, I don't want to know. Like, But right now, I'm having a great time. You know what I mean? Like, it's just honoring every interaction.
I feel you. I think that one thing I've learned just through this podcast is that what I live for is the exchange. And what you've attached is the person. But what you really are here for and show up for is the exchange. And I think once you attach the person and you try and make it more than what it is in the present moment, at the time that you meet, at the opportunity in the intersection, then that's when it becomes an unnecessary like
Disingenuous.
dialogue. Yeah, totally. And I just think about like, I remember once this is the last time you went to Canada, I think. And it was like when you were packing up that weekend and you had a lot to pack, but we hadn't, we had a date. Like I think we had dinner plans or something. And then I remember you calling that afternoon, and I think we had like moved it a couple of times. And then you called that afternoon, you're like, you know what? I just can't come because I won't be myself, because I'll be thinking about so many other things. And that really stuck with me because I used to have this idea of what friendship looks like and how it should shape and be formed. And when I realized that, it kind of gave me permission to be like, no, I can say no to things after I've committed to them, because it's not about like showing up for that commitment and that integrity. There's that aspect as well, but there's also the integrity of self and meeting that moment to show up for that commitment. And in that idea and through this podcast, I realized what I'm actually here is for the conversation and for that exchange and for that interaction. And once you think that way, you free everyone and you free yourself in the process. And it's been the most exciting discovery, I think. But
that's the magic in existence.
Yeah, it's true. It's like meeting that moment. But I want to actually talk about the other side as well of friendship. What do you think the red flags are in friendship?
There's a clear distinction between expectations and standards. I have standards for how I conduct myself. And that is a culmination of my upbringing, my experiences, my value like structure system, my outcomes that I want for life, and my personality, my genetic disposition, my et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Based on all of that, it's a whole plethora of existence to date and my trajectory, that I have standards in place in how I will conduct myself. Now, if I were to put those standards onto other people, that's an expectation. So I'm expecting them to be the same level of person that I'm coming to the table with. They may be more or less. They might bring more to the table. So I'm not going to feel guilty for not bringing the level that they might bring based on their disposition of existence to date. And I'm also not going to expect that of somebody who may not have had those experiences. The first rule of cognition is that you can only understand that which you can imagine. So if people haven't lived or done the different sorts of like, for instance, like expecting somebody who works in, who has a mathematical mind to understand like, the depth of like abstract art, or like the interpretation of abstract art, which may not resonate with them, that's a disservice to both of us. So in the same way, I'm approaching life as I will honor and understand people in that interaction in that moment, but I have no expectations of them to meet the level of which I will, but I'm also not going to bring less to the table as a friend, or as a person, or I'm not going to be, if somebody has done something shitty to me, I'm not going to be a shitty person back to them, because I'm just not going to succumb to that, or like lessen my integrity for my own standards for myself.
Sure. So if that happened, then how do you approach that situation? So if someone did something shitty to you and you're not going to reciprocate because of your standards, how do you navigate that friendship?
I think we have to alleviate this attachment we put to friendships. Like, it just needs to be transient. So what it is in that moment, it is, right? So we shouldn't have somebody, and that's in relationships, that's in family, that's in everything. It's like, we shouldn't be dependent on anybody. So if they let me down, I'm like, that's cool, man, right? Keep it moving. I'm that person that will keep it moving. And if I see them, I see them. If I don't, I don't,
But surely your approach to that will change now because you know that they've done something shitty. Like, okay, so your standard is the same. Somebody does something shitty. You're like, cool, I'm good.
There was a situation where, and I haven't been in this space for a long time. Like, I'm just not that way inclined. Like I don't, because I keep myself busy with so much shit, you know. But somebody had said something about me to their friends in a situation, in a work situation, and that person kept probing and kept asking, what happened, what happened? I'm like, nothing happened. And so a month later they go, you know, this is what so and so said, and kept probing, like, what actually happened. And I was like, listen, yo, just because I've had a falling out with somebody doesn't mean I'm going to talk shit about them. And they're like, okay. And then and they were like, that's cool. And then they go, well, this is what they said, but we see how you conduct yourself and we see how they've conducted yourself. Nobody's believing what they've said. We got you. And I was like, y'all aren't my judge and jury, but I appreciate you so much. And if that's what this person needs to say to go on with their day, I wish them well.
Okay.
Conduct yourself in a way where your integrity and your actions speak for themselves. It's never about that moment. It's about everything that leads up to it. You know, I wouldn't put myself in a situation where a friend lets me down because I wouldn't expect them to let me down. If they came or didn't come for something, if they showed up or didn't show up, that's cool, you know, but I wouldn't be dependent on it. I wouldn't have angst association to whether they came or not. If they came in that moment, I'd be like, fucking amazing, you know? Or do you know what I mean? And then and the other thing is, though, once you understand your mind, once you understand, like, lots of therapy later, you understand that emotions have chemical reactions in your mind, right? And I've come to this point in the last several years where it's just like, I will not allow anybody to take over my body like that, in the sense of, why would I give somebody the power to make me angry so all this flood of emotional chemicals flow through my body? You're giving them that control. A friend of mine said to me once, and this stuck with me, and she's incredible. She's one of my dearest friends, bestest little bestie of many. And she had heard this from somebody else, but she had said this to me, that there are only two types of people in life. They're either your friend or your teacher. So a friend will be there, but anybody who has made you feel any type of way or done you wrong, you have to reflect on why you gave them the power to have that effect over you. And that's a lesson that you need to learn. And that's something you need to reflect on internally, on why you gave them that power. It has nothing to do with them. It's, why are you bothered by what they said?
It's the trigger. It's the trigger.
The trigger. And it's always never about the person. So I don't have red flags, because it's just like, we're all here just living life. There's a term, it's called sonder. And and I read this like decades ago, and it's this term of that everybody is the center of their own universe. And that's from evolution, from survival, for everything. They don't give a fuck if you like do X, Y, or Z. At the end of the day, they're looking out for themselves. They just want to be fed and their body to survive. You know what I mean? It's a survival thing. It's evolution, it's genetics, it's all of that. So as much as you might want to be like, I want this person to think X, Y, and Z about me, they're going to think about themselves first, then you. There's a quote actually I saw the other day, and it was like, in your 20s, you're so concerned about what everybody thinks about you. In your 40s, you stop caring what everybody thinks about you. In your 60s, you realize nobody was thinking about you. And I was like, ain't that some shit?
It's so true.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Okay. What are you most excited about? What's coming up for you?
Right now? Freedom. I'm excited about this mindset I'm in, and freedom. COVID did something so spectacular where it made everybody get off the hamster wheel, you know? And so, yeah, I reflect back on, if all those deals in the US and the distro deal in UK, Europe, Middle East, and the collab, we would have been on this like hamster wheel that was going to be the next 10 years of my life. Now I get to reestablish every element. And as a result of that, you know, I've been painting a lot. I've been writing a lot. I've put together bits of great bodies of works, which is now looking like it's going to turn into 2 different publications eventually. And I'm exploring. There's just a lot. There's a lot that's come out of this time. So what excites me the most is the uncertainty, which is kind of spectacular, because when you're on a trajectory that's kind of black and white, there's a goalpost, and you're working towards it, and then if you don't reach it, it's this angst associated to, I got to reach it, and then you reach it. Because what's happened is, I've done that so many times, I've reached it, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That wasn't what I thought it would be, So I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I just know that this freedom that I've got in this space, mentally, society, from like the expectations of society, family, whatever else it is, and even in terms of like professionally, all of that, there's a freedom that I've got. And there's a lot of things in the works, which I won't speak about now, but yeah, it's opened up a lot of doors.
What is the excitement about uncertainty? Can you tell me a bit about that? Because that's something people are the most afraid of. Unknown, uncertain, what's going to happen. And there's this complete desire for control, which becomes a detriment most of the time. But you're excited about uncertainty.
It means anything's possible. Right? Whereas like, there's so much of the human conditioning that we haven't explored yet, personally, for each and every single one of us, right? And this is the thing, like, it always go back to like the first rule of cognition is that you can only understand that which you can imagine. So I feel like within my imagination, whatever existed, I've experienced it all. So I can associate a previous feeling or a moment of joy or success or whatever it is to all those milestones. So now with uncertainty, it's this excitement that I'm going to tap into stuff I haven't previously tapped into. And that's just like, this comes from this thirst and this desire to explore more and more and more of life, and I think it's like you said, in our upbringing, it's like a seek means a learner. We're going to learn till the end of time. And it's like the moment you know it all, you think you know it all, you will have known nothing at all. We will learn till the end of time. So somewhere along the line in society, we created these constructs and these narratives of like, you must have the white picket fence, a mortgage with a home, X amount of portfolio, you have this career, you should be a director or an owner, or your children should go to these sort of like Ivy League, or not even America, but these sorts of like schools and have these amount of degrees and all of this. And there's this narrative of materialistic things that we should gain before our life, and that drives our purpose. But it's hollow, all of it, and it's like that conditioning. I feel like I've been on the path of rejecting for quite some time now, but it's the human interactions. It's like creating things that are going to far surpass us, like whether that's in terms of like music or art or literature or a brand or a legacy, or just giving back to people, inspiring them to create their own journey, or, being that solid rock for somebody, or whatever it is. It's just this moment of uncertainty of I'm not working towards, and I have absolutely no disrespect for anybody which that is their path, but I just know from my mind and my existence that doesn't resonate for me. And then there was this like discomfort because I was trying to make it resonate, but it doesn't, so yeah, the uncertainty comes from I have so much more to explore, and I've shed that weight of wanting to appease others and wanting to fall into that. So, and I'm just at the beginning of it. I think that's what's excitement. That's where it stems from.
I think that it takes one to achieve all those things in order to be excited about
I
uncertainty.
know, I am sitting, I know.
I was like, you have to get there in order to be like, what's next? And so many people, 100%. Me included, may get stuck in that process to like get that to make that happen. So really things like that realization would only come with work and experience and a lot of emotional maturity.
Agree. It takes a lot of time.
Preet, I love you. Thank you for coming on the show.
I love you. You know that.
As you can tell, we had so much fun doing that episode. And I just hope you enjoyed listening to it or watching it from wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whether you're driving, on a computer, cooking, or just listening. Thank you so much for listening in and tuning in. If you want to keep up with Inder's work, I'll add her socials and her websites in the description below. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you all next week.